moment, and he is not going to be here. He'll be back next week, though. Our special guests tonight are Kkirk of Crimson Racing, owner of two of the top horses in the game, which is Crimson Chin in terms of engagement. He has a very good stable. He came in around the same time as I did, a little bit earlier. And coming up a little bit later, because he's on the road making his way home, will be East Coast Stables. Um, how you doing tonight, Kirk?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Excited.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
To get started, I would like to know, how did you get involved with Zed? What brought you into Zed?
So I think it's probably a kind of a popular path. Started in Top Shot. Luckily, kind of got in there somewhat early, right around when Bales started kind of tweeting about it in early mid-January, and that kind of was like, hey, smart guy, seems to know where the puck's going. So I hopped on Top Shot, got pretty heavily involved pretty quickly over 2, 3, 4 weeks. Obviously rode that wave into February of where everything was 10xing pretty quickly. Made some good profits there, and then some of the Top Shot guys started talking about Zed, and I was like, hey, this idea looks pretty awesome. The idea that you could have same kind of NFT structure, but potential income associated with it, breeding, a game in general where Top Shot's cool. I still have a decent portfolio there, but you can't really do a ton with it. I know they've started to add some utility more recently with getting involved in games and doing all that stuff, but the idea that the game itself was the utility, the ability to breed, the ability to earn income, studding out. So once I kind of learned about it, bought a horse or two with a partner of mine, and then just fell in love and kind of grew the stable from there. So I don't remember exactly when I got in, but it was somewhere in kind of maybe that late February, if not probably sometime in March. I was in Zed and quickly got addicted.
Yes. How did you do in Top Shot?
We did well, yeah. Obviously, not everything worked out well. We were, I had a partner for some of it. I was doing it on my own early on, and then I started buying bigger and bigger things as I had more and more profits from some of the earlier stuff, and I didn't want to put all my own money into it, right? So, made some good money in January, kind of into February, got, into some bigger stuff. We hit one or two kind of big flips. We had like a LeBron legendary that we made some good money on. So a few things there, but, bought a few things also in mid to late February when, we were kind of at the peak. So lost some money on some of that, but overall did pretty well. Basically funded the Zed stable, basically from Top Shot profits. So kind of rolled most of that in. And now my Top Shot is a lot smaller than my Zed exposure. So kind of made that flip over the last several months.
Okay. I do notice the Michael Jordan jersey in the background, so I'm assuming you're either a Bulls fan or a Jordan fan.
Yeah, so I grew up outside of Boston. I still live outside of Boston, so still a Celtics fan, but grew up in the 90s, so Jordan was the guy. I got this one. It's actually autographed. You can't see it now on the two there. There's an autograph. So
Okay.
kind of the background of my webcast and whatnot for work and everything. So it's more of a conversation piece, but yeah, Jordan's the best. Grew up watching him, but a Celtics fan at heart.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Do you have any people that you look up to in the Zed community?
Yeah, so I kind of did. I think what probably most people do in the beginning. Got on the Discord, read a ton of stuff, asked a ton of questions. Some of the OGs, Doofy and Zed Gazette, and there's a ton of them. I won't even think of offhand, but kind of all those guys, kind of got me up to speed, whether it be one-on-one DMs or just reading their content, watching their streams, doing all that. Now I'm lucky enough, people, I'm blessed to have some good horses. So people kind of come to me, and then it opened up other doors to talk to some really good stables over time too. So, kind of feel like I'm more kind of in the know now and talking with some of the community more, more often, more frequent, and also being able to help out now and kind of pass on what I got from the other guys. But yeah, Doofy was a big help early on. Now I talk with him a ton. Poseidon, all the same guys that probably everyone looked at early on when, we didn't have all the tools we have today. All the content was early. The game was still kind of developing. Prices were a lot lower, but, the idea of breeding was still kind of being rolled out. I think when I joined, we had breeding open for a little while, and then it kind of shut down. So there was a ton of speculation on what was going on there. So I kind of did what I think a lot of people do and just absorbed as much as I could, read as much as I could, watched as much video, kind of got up to speed. And, you realize, hey, these guys who've been in it, know a lot more than you, but you also realize at the same time, like, hey, there's still a ton unknown about this game.
Yes.
There's so much to be figured out. Breeding is not like an easy plug and play solution. Even racing, you got to figure out how to race your own horses. No one else can tell you to do it for you. So I think once you kind of learn that, it was easier to just go off on your own and just start testing. So that's what I did early on, a lot cheaper horses early on, and then kind of grew up, obviously, with Crimson being kind of the main horse, and then Terms of Engagement being the biggest purchase until last week for our stable. So yeah, it's been a roller coaster, but it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, that's good. You mind telling us a story on how you acquired the Crimson Chin? Because
Yeah,
I believe you acquired Terms of Engagement after Crimson Chin.
that's right. So yeah, so Crimson, I'll never forget. So the first real good horse I acquired is a horse called Melanie. You may not know it by name. It's a really good horse. You should look it up. Great U shape, Z4 Nakamoto legendary, super rare super coat that I got for like zero point 0.8 or 0.85 Ethereum in an auction, like in my early days. So it was one of these, like it was an auction at like 7 a.m. Someone was running through Discord, and I'm like, this thing seems like way underpriced. It was early on. I hadn't spent that much on a horse yet. And I was like, I just went all in and got the horse. So that was my best horse kind of early on. It was a great winner. I think it's got like a 17% win rate in 250 some odd races. So one day I'm racing that horse at 1,000 meters, which is, it's usually a good distance. It pulled, I think I was in class 3 at the time, maybe class 4, because I could fluctuate with that horse. And it would always pull somewhere between, call it 6 and 9 odds. It was, a good horse. And one race, I put it in, and I'm on the Discord. And this was back before, Know Your Horses and all these other sites gave you like the odds in real time. You had to find it on the Discord bot.
Yeah,
So I'm in
I
there,
actually
and
remember that.
I pull up that race that's about to go off, and I see I'm 14-1. And Melanie had never gone to 14-1 at 1,000 again in class 3 or 4. And I'm like, what's going on? I look, there's this horse called the Crimson Chin that pulled like 3.5. And I'm like, this is insane. I've never seen a horse this good against Melanie. So I immediately go onto Discord. I start searching Crimson Chin, and I see there was a post from the previous owner who, from like an hour before, was looking to sell it.
Oh wow.
And so I don't think he had fully understood just how good it was. It had won a couple races, so it was like, I think it was like its 6th or 7th race, and it had already won twice. So the guy knew it was good, but I don't think he had looked at the odds and seen it was like getting 2s and 3s and 4s. So I was like, hey, like, I want this horse. What can we do to make a deal? And basically 20 minutes later, I traded for the horse. So I traded a Z4 Genesis unraced, but I got back the Crimson Chin and a little over 1 ETH. So
Got him.
so I ended up paying, I think all in, it basically came to, I paid somewhere like 1.2 Ethereum for
Okay.
Crimson. So yeah, it was honestly, if I wasn't sitting at the computer at that one time when that race was about to go off, I remember where I was. I was sitting upstairs on my couch. I had friends about to come over. It was like 2 in the afternoon. And I just happened to be on there looking at the Discord bot for the odds. And yeah, I thank the, whoever is watching over me for that all the time, because otherwise I never would have known. I probably would have looked at it after the fact and be like, shit, that's a good horse. But I was able to
Wow.
buy it literally within a half hour of seeing those odds. I bought Crimson. So
That's like a great story. That's
yeah,
like
I've told a couple people, but it's never been on stream before, so that might be news to some folks. But yeah, it was a pretty awesome story.
that's wow. 'Cause in my head, I'm just thinking like you seen that thing where they go, got him. That's what happened. Like
Yeah,
when
I
they
mean, look, the guy I bought it from, and I forget his name. I wish I could call out who it was. I'd have to go back in my messages. It's been a while, but he was trying to make a name for himself as a breeder. I believe he bred the horse, because Crimson's not a Genesis; it's a Z7 Legendary Zabo. So I believe he bred it, and he was trying to make a name for himself of breeding good horses and selling them off. So um, part of me says he knew what he had, and he wanted to just get it out there to get more for kind of his stable. But yeah, it worked out well. I think for both of us. I mean, he still got a good price, for a relatively. It was still under 10 races, right? You didn't know what you really had here, and then
Yeah.
obviously for me, it worked out great. So.
I wonder if that guy still has those two horses he used to produce Crimson.
So it's funny that the parents of Crimson have bred, the two of them have bred another really good horse. So I don't know if he owns both of them or he owns one and has been able to breed with the same male twice. But Crimson has a twin that is a really legit good horse as well.
Got to look that up, people.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
person might take an offer.
yeah, exactly. I've never seen it for sale, any of the bloodline there, but you should check it out one time. I don't have the names off the top of my head, but
Look,
there's a good horse there.
looks like Play It All Day. Play All Dave said it's Cadet Amaryllis.
Amaral, yep, that's right. And then I think the mother is like Sussex Master, I think is the name. Yeah, that's the
Mhm.
name of the twin, Cadet. It's a really good horse.
Thank you. Um, so, Racing Crimson Chin, how long did it take for you to determine her um, best race distances? Because you had a really good racer from the beginning. So how long? Because I don't think 1,000 meters is her preferred distance either.
No, it is. Yeah,
Oh,
it is. Yes. So it was pretty easy. I mean, she can pull good odds basically everywhere except 1600. But once you start looking at like the speed data and just results, like 1,000, in my opinion, she's the best horse in the game. I believe I haven't been proven wrong on this yet, but I don't know for 100% fact. But I don't think she's ever not been the favorite at 1,000 meters in any race. So. Again, I could be wrong there, but I've never seen a race where she's not the favorite. Doesn't win all the time. Obviously, wins at just over 20% in Class One at 1,000, but that's pretty damn good. But
yeah.
yeah, so I mostly stick to 1,000. Every once in a while, I'll race 1,200. I used to race a little more at like 2,400 because she can pull good odds there, but it's really a win or a lose, and she loses a lot more than she wins there. But I'm not classing down with her because she wins so much on sprints that it wasn't worth just entering these 2,400s to try to get the U shape. She's got a bit of a U anyway at 1,000 and 1,200, so I just stick there.
Yeah, it's not really a you when you're in class one and you can make a
Yeah,
mistake.
yeah.
So
I don't even. I know we might talk about that because I know some of the the class changes, but I'm not a guy. I'm lucky, I guess, in some respects. I've never had to worry about classing down. My two best horses, like you mentioned, Crimson and Terms. They're both in C1 and they're not changing. That's not going down. I mean, if you look at their class points, I think it's like 300 and 600 or something. Like they're not even close. So I have a few other horses I'll race around and obviously can try to class down a little bit, but none of them are that great. So I've never really had to focus on classing down. I just race at their best distance and go for it.
um, and so I would like to hear the story on how you acquire terms of engagement as well. Because I just a quick backstory. Whoever had terms of engagement, if you look at his Griffin race, there are other very good horses in his Griffin race. He spiked the other horses to 200 odds. And I don't know if you look at the odds, but it's very seldom when you see horses that are spiked at 200 odds. And I know it was back in December, but those odds were ridiculously high. And
Yeah. So in terms she pulled 1.8.
1.8.
Yeah. So this was Doofy's horse originally. The way I understand it, it was Doofy's horse. I didn't buy it directly from Doofy. At some point along the line, he sold it, and I bought it from the guy who bought it from Doofy. But the guy who bought it from Doofy never raced it, so it was all of Doofy's races. So he just listed it. It was on the market. We were looking. Me and my partner were looking to make a bigger purchase. Obviously, we hadn't spent that much on Crimson, who was now starting to really kind of bring the value of our stable up. So we were like, okay, we can afford to maybe spend a little more here. We had bought a couple Genesis or a handful of Genesis along the way, but had never spent that much on anything. I think actually the first horse we ever bought, to get on a little tangent here, was a Z3 Genesis. But we paid like 2.1 ETH for it because it was still pretty early on, and we bought a Z3, never raced it until very recently. So we had paid little bits along the way for some Genesis, but it never made a big splash purchase. So terms of engagement was on the market. We were looking for a Z1. We probably weren't going to be able to afford an unraced at the time, so we were looking for something that was raced, but maybe was like underappreciated. And I'd be lying if I said I knew how good Terms was when I was evaluating her, but I did see something there. The odds on her are not amazing. She pulls in class one anywhere between, it can be high single digits, but she can pull 15, 16, 17. But the key there with her, and I think other people have heard me talk about it now on a few streams, but she finishes second and third. She finishes top three 50% of the time. So she only wins, call it 10%. I think I can get her up to maybe like 12 if I continue to race at the right distances, but call it 10 to 12%. But she comes in second and third like 20% each. So the odds, the way they're constructed, and we can talk about, the changes coming through in Zed with removal of odds and all that stuff. But, the one big issue with odds right now is they only tell you the horse's likelihood for first place. And with Terms, if you're looking at odds, you're going to be like, this is a mediocre Z1, right? It's pulling, I don't know what the average odds she has are, but it's got to be in the double digits. So
I think it's 10.
That sounds right. Let's see here. Yeah, know your horses for every race she's ever had, 12.4 average odds.
Wow.
So, you look at that and you're like, okay, fine. It can compete. It can win, 8%, whatever, something like that. But you do the math and you start realizing, hey, this thing, Terms of Engagement has run 421 races, never come in last.
That's an amazing statistic.
I mean, there's no horse like that. As far as I know, there's never been a horse to run at least that many races and never come in last. It's come in 11th like 4 times. 4 times it's come in 11th. So the slope of like the position chart goes from, nothing at 12 up to second, and then it drops off at first. But it's super profitable to just keep hitting seconds and thirds and then win every once in a while. So, we got lucky, obviously not knowing just how good she was. She was on the open market. I think I reached out. She may have been listed for like 12, 13, 14 each, something like that. This was, I think I bought her on like June 10th or something right around there. So it was like basically 2 months ago now. I was able to work her down to, I paid 11.75 ETH. So it was a big purchase for us. But, I think looking back on it, it was, somewhat of a steal just given how good this horse is. And now that tournaments, we've done the Pony Plug tournaments a handful of times. This horse is in the top 5, I think 2 out of the first 3 tournaments. So it's a monster tournament horse because it never loses, so you never go backward, right? So I think as Zed starts to open up more and more of like, different type of races that it can offer, if you start doing double ups where half the field gets paid and half doesn't, right? This horse is going to be in that top half like 80% of the time, right? So I can just start hopefully churning out, profits with those kind of races. So it's been a home run from our standpoint, but it's an awesome horse. Honestly, like between Terms and Crimson, like a Z1, with that kind of profile, it's probably worth more, I would think, than Crimson. Maybe others would disagree, but we're super lucky to have that one.
Yeah, I have 2 horses actually that are like that. I made it to the day 3 of the tournament, and the horse, her name's Our Lady Carol. She went from class 5 to class 3 in day 1 and day 2 of the tournament because I was stupid and tried to race her a couple more times. And she was in class 3 for day 3 and didn't do well. Made
Yeah.
the top 50, but could not. Like she got a 12, a 2, and a 7, and I was like, well, that's not going to cut it.
It happens. I mean, I've entered Crimson in all their tournaments so far, and I don't think, in the first tournament, I think she finished like 15th, so we made it to the final day. But like in the last tournament, it had a good first day, I think, and then it got crushed on the second day. So it's like you got to have a real good lucky streak for a few days to get through with one of those. But Terms, Terms can go 7th, 8th, 9th, 3 races in a row, and you're probably out, right? But it throws in a second, a third, and a fourth, and you're like, all right, I'm in pretty good shape. So yeah, it's been pretty good.
All right. A question I do have is, how do you define success in Zed, and how do you feel like you would beat the game since it is a game?
Yeah, I mean that's a loaded question. Still trying to figure that out for one. I think the success that's like more easily proven is racing, right? Like you win or you lose, and you do it over a number of races, and if you're good or you're not in terms of what horses you have. So, being able to identify horses that others are maybe willing to throw away, getting lucky, obviously, buying a Genesis and racing it and it's good. I mean, but, racing it at the right class, the right distance, all that can make you successful. I think the breeding side of that is a lot harder. I
Yes.
can't say that I'm any expert yet. I haven't bred any monster horses. I got a couple that have been good, decent, but nothing kind of proven out yet to be like, hey, if we match this with this, we get, something good. So
Mhm.
that's the part that kind of intrigues me the most. Like I think over time, and you've heard others say it, I'm sure it kind of turns into a breeding game.
Yeah,
Obviously, yeah, go.
I was gonna say I think Zed Run in and of itself is a breeding game. Racing just confirms whether your breeding is successful or not. Like I anybody who knows me, because I'm in quite a few discords, knows that I have maybe 60 or 70 different breeding theories. I've tried about five of them, was unsuccessful on all of
Yeah.
them so
Well, it's
far.
so
So
hard too. I mean, with the new
yes.
changes, like we were talking before the show, and I got in, I think, a little before you into Zed.
Hmm.
Breeding was open when I first joined. I didn't really have any horses to take advantage of it, but you could breed every male 7 times and every
Yes.
female twice. So you could test so much faster. Guys like Poseidon doing their inbreeding, strategies and whatnot. Like you could breed twins right away. You could test
Yes.
out different things. Like for people like us now really coming into it with these new changes, it's going to take a while. So I think that's part of what keeps Zed going, hopefully, for,
Yes.
the long term is like, there's no easy answer here. I've been talking with a ton of the big stables with, amazing horses, and none of us can breed anything great, right?
Yes.
Crimson has one baby so far. I raced him a few times, nothing great, right? So like, you don't have a good horse and immediately get good offspring, right? You got to try different things. Terms has actually been a pretty decent breeder. Doofy bred her out like 20 times before I ever owned her. So I think I have 3 babies from Terms, but Doofy had like 19 or 20. So there's a few good ones in there. So I think, I'm starting to look at, hey, do different types of finish, profiles translate differently. Obviously, being a Z1 probably gives you a little bit of a leg up on others in terms of breeding anyway, I would think. But yeah, that's the part that excites me. So as far as like, beating the game, winning the game, being successful, racing is always going to be there because I do envision, hopefully, we get to a point where like, hey, there's advertiser money in these races. You get real big, high profile races where Crimson and Terms and other, dominant horses can be running under the lights on Friday night for, purses that are in the tens of thousands because there's sponsorship dollars in there. And, that part I think can be winning, without the
Hmm.
breeding part if you get a good horse. But, you know, over time, I would think horses like Crimson, get beat out with other bred horses eventually.
Maybe because
Hopefully
Crimson,
not for a while.
maybe not because Crimson is a bred horse.
That's right. That's right. And that's what
So
people sometimes forget too. I mean, there's a lot of great Genesis horses as
mhm,
well, but yeah, look, who knows? I would think things will probably get better slightly over time, but I think
mhm,
if you have a great horse now, you're probably not going to be obsolete anytime soon. It's not going to be like a step change one day where, all of a sudden you're pulling, 7 odds and now you're pulling 15 every race. Like, I don't think it's going to work that way, but it's going to be slowly but surely over time. New horses enter and you're like, oh, this one's pretty dangerous, right? And then there's another one. And then, so all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm not the top 2 horse in this race. I'm the top 5, 6, so
yeah,
I'm excited though. I think that's what keeps it interesting.
yes, that is true. Um, what is your approach to race selection with horses other than Crimson? Could you just dollar in at 1,000 and
Yeah,
then go?
yeah. So early on, I think what you have to do, you're selling yourself short if you just throw a horse in a distance for one race. You look at the odds, you pull a 20, and you never race it again. I think you
Mhm,
got to do a handful at every distance, or at least like close to every distance. If you're seeing a trend, maybe you don't have to hit everything in between, but you got to test short, you got to test middle, you got to test long. You got to do it a handful of times because you could be spooked, quote unquote spooked
mhm,
by a horse at a certain length where I've had horses where you put them in one time in a race and you pull a 16, you're like, okay, it's fine, it's okay. And then you race it again, you pull an 8.5, and you're like, oh, okay, there was something there, right? Now I can look for which horses were in those races. So early on, throw them into anything and everything. I start cheap, the cheapest races just to get volume in there. Once you kind of start seeing a pattern, both, in odds and obviously odds going away, kind of more so in finish position and speed. then you can kind of hone in on what you're doing, and you got to figure out like, hey, if your horse is really good, you can ratchet up the entry fee.
Yes.
If it's okay or good and it can pull decent odds and win, you keep it at low entry fees, and you just kind of rake in that dollar, $2, $5, whatever it is, every several races you win, and over time, if you do enough volume, you could still make some good money. So I think it depends on the horse, but that's kind of the strategy. And then once you know what your horse is good at, again, I've never been one for declassing horses, partially because of the horses I have that just don't declass well. But I also think like if you're good, just race it. If you're good at a distance, just keep it going. So once you find that sweet spot, I just exploit it, just keep it going. And if you go from class 4 to class 2 or 1, it is what it is. If you really can't compete up there, maybe you pause it, you do some breeding, you try to make some money elsewhere. And then if you have to declass it, or you just wait for Zed to maybe make some class changes down the road, and you have a little more opportunity to make some wins. That's kind of the strategy I've had.
All right. Hello, we got East Coast Joe from East Coast Stables here as well. Sorry.
What's up,
Just
Joe?
want to go back.
What's
real
going
quick.
on? How are you guys?
All right, yourself?
I'm hanging in there. Busy.
Okay, I want to highlight something Kirk just said. And it's something like I've been in Zed a little bit after him, and he highlighted something about racing that I didn't even think of myself. And it has to do with when your horse's odds get spiked. And he highlighted that you might have raced this horse before and got lower odds. So it's up to you to figure out which horse actually spiked your horse's races odds. And so that's just a pro tip of Zed. Like if nobody caught it, I have to make sure everybody caught that. Your horse's odds fluctuate if you don't have a racer like Crimson Chin or Vanilla Bean or something. Your horse's odds will fluctuate. And he just highlighted that certain horses can spike your horse's odds. And that means that horse is good and probably is a class above your horse. So just try to determine what horse that is and why your odds got spiked. Thank you for the tip, Crimson.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sorry.
Sure, that is true.
So, Joe, just joining us. Thank you for coming to the show.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. I just got to ask you a quick couple of questions. What got you into Zed, and do you look up to anybody within the community, and if so, who?
Sure. So, I actually my first dip into any sort of NFTs, you could say, would be Top Shot. I'm a big sports guy, so Top Shot was my big thing. I had a bit of success with that. I pulled 2 Lucas in my first 2 packs, so my return on investment was pretty good at the time. But I followed somebody on Twitter on my personal account named Jack Settleman, which some people actually know. He dipped a little bit into Zed Run. He's a little bit into everything, but he is a big Top Shot guy. So Jack got me into Zed Run. Pretty much he started posting about buying a virtual horse, and being from Jersey, Monmouth Park over here is pretty big. So I'm there pretty often when I can be, watching the horses live, of course. So I'm big into that stuff. So I said, you know what, let me take a look at it. And it was my first time doing anything with like Ethereum or any sort of MetaMask. I had no idea what that was. And my first horse I actually paid for with PayPal because I couldn't tell you how to even load money onto my MetaMask at the time. People were trying to guide me, and I was like, you guys are speaking gibberish. So I ended up PayPaling the guy, and I think it was $200 for a Z10 at the time. And it was a complete glue stick, which even nowadays that horse is not even running because I think the new owner doesn't want to lose any more money on it. So, but pretty much that's what got me into Zed Run. So I'm thankful for Jack because obviously it's been quite an experience, and pretty much I learned a lot with Ethereum and with crypto and NFTs through Zed Run, because that was kind of like my second. I wouldn't even call Top Shot an NFT really. I mean, you can, but I'm thinking more of like the projects like Zed Run, Bored Ape Yacht Club, all the things that you see on your Twitter timeline nowadays. So, and going part 2 to your question, I guess people who I look up to, there's a lot of OGs. I mean, I know a lot of people seek advice from me my game plan and what I do, because I am pretty active in the Discord and on Twitter and whatnot. But there are a lot more people who have been into Zed longer than myself. Doofy, of course, he's one of the people I definitely look up to, and he's a good inspiration too because he does a lot for the community as well. Selling horses for cheap, getting people into the game. I mean, Poseidon is somebody else who I also look up to. Every time he comes into the chat, I know, I saw the hat. I had to shout him out without even you wearing that hat. I started watching after Jack posted about it. I started watching YouTube videos, and Poseidon, I watched every single one of his videos, and he knows what he's talking about. I mean, he definitely hits the head on the nail a lot of the time. So, and he likes to pop in chat every so often. I know he's a different time zone than I am, but it's always good getting advice from him and listening to him because he, like I said, he knows exactly what's going on. But there are a lot of people out there. I give credit to a lot of people who start these third-party sites, Tyler and Ryan from Know Your Horses. I mean, that they know a lot of stuff, and I know they haven't been into the game as long, but they've really taken the time to dig deep and understand different aspects, which they're relaying onto their website as well, which is really nice too. So, I mean, I could go on and on. I don't want to forget about anybody, so I'll keep the list fairly short. But yes, there is a lot of people that I do look up to in the community.
Joe, you missed it before you came on, but my start was identical to yours. It was Top Shot. It was Jack Settleman.
Jack.
It was getting into Zed. It was the same people. So I think it's a pretty common, we kind of got there when Zed was really kind of taking its first leg up, and it's probably a lot of people that did the same thing.
I know Jack. Well, Jack had a big following through Top Shot, and he still does. And I know a lot of people follow him on Twitter. So when he started posting about Zed, when he started buying his first few horses, I know a lot of people just, because he was so successful with Top Shot, they just kind of, even if they weren't into horse racing, they just kind of jumped onto it just to say, hey, let's see what it's about. But I definitely commend him for getting a lot of people into Zed Run because I know a lot of people who joined because of him.
That's wonderful. What do you define winning in Zed Run? How do you see yourself as beating the game?
So that's tough. I don't know if there is a way to beat the game. I mean, I guess you can say beating the game is finding, cracking the breeding code. Maybe that's beating the game. I feel like that's probably as far as you can go with quote unquote beating the game. But I think being successful is just having a healthy stable. I think, by a healthy stable, I mean you have a good division of racers versus breeders. I think that's important, that you do have a good combination, that you don't just have a bunch of racehorses. You do want to be able to breed and eventually breed in-house when Zed, introduces that. So you're not getting sniped for all your Z1s and, Z2s on the market. But I think being successful, you have to have a good return on investment for sure, whether you get that through breeding or you get that through racing. So even if you do kind of lean one way towards another, you have to be successful with it. I think right now you could probably get better return on investment with racing. Personally, just because the unraced market right now, especially on exclusives and elites, that it's so low. You can buy them for a few $100, which is good because you want people to get into the game as well. But just the price that you pay to breed these horses versus the return that you get after all the fees through OpenSea, I do think right now your best bang for your buck is pretty much buying these unraced horses and racing them and trying to find those racers. I mean, there are a lot of undiscovered talent right now that have no Griffin ran, that are just waiting to be unleashed. So that's what I've been doing. A lot of people know I buy tons and tons of unraced horses, and I take hits on a lot of them, but a lot of people know that I've been very successful with, a handful of horses that I've either kept or sold.
We know a lot about Crimson's horses because he has two of the top horses. What are your two favorite horses, and what are your two most successful horses?
Everybody hates when I talk about my one horse. Nobody likes when I talk about Bon Voyage because that's the only horse that I talk about in my stable. That's my most successful horse, and I actually bought that horse unraced. I when they reopened breeding back up, I was looking for the owner, which took me forever, and I have a pretty good outreach in the community. There we go. See, I knew Dave would say something. I saw him typing in the chat, so I'm sure Lucy's going to be saying something in there too. So, but I was looking for the owner for a couple days, and eventually I happened to bump into him accidentally. He reached out to me from a want to buy post and said, "Hey, I have this horse for sale," and we negotiated for a little bit, and pretty much she ended up being a complete beast, and she ended up breeding a complete beast as well. So she played right into what my breeding theories are, which I know I've dipped a little bit into. So I was happy to get her as well as Miss Andretti at the time. That was one of my other favorite horses that I sold. She was a great long distance runner, especially in the lower classes. But as she started to bump up a little bit, there were a couple spook horses that got to her. So, but right now, Bon Voyage, I think, is my favorite horse in my stable. I also like, there's a horse that I have called Burn After Viewing. Not a racer. That's actually one of my popular breeding horses. It's a Z6 exclusive, but it's Billion's grandson. I was actually pretty surprised. I usually post him up for cheap in stud. I usually post him up for like $100-$150 just so people have, good blood in their stable. It's nice to have Billion's blood in your stable. But he actually produced a 16% winner. Already, I think the horse already has 250 plus races. Already has 45 or so wins. It's a weird name horse, Tsuko Yami. I don't even know. It probably stands for something in a different language. I've never really looked it up, but
Japanese god of the sun, I believe.
See, yeah, you may know better. You may know better than me. I'm
pulled that out of nowhere.
No,
I'm
an anime.
I am impressed.
I'm an anime watcher, and so
okay.
So I'm not into anime, but yeah, you're probably right on the money with that. Which it's a great name. It's a great name. I mean, if you know the meaning behind the name, people know that's one of my favorite parts of Zed Run is naming your horses. But I was pleasantly surprised with that. That was a nice little surprise. And there's a couple other horses that he bred that were 9-10% winners. Nothing too crazy, but it wasn't complete glue. So if you get a 9 or 10% winner right now, you kind of just say, oh, that's pretty good. But I'd prefer that than a horse that pulls 40 odds every race. So that's just me.
Yes, I got it. And so to catch you up with Crimson, as far as the questions is concerned, freaking lost the question I was gonna ask. Attribute that to age. Probably.
It's his good-looking face. I know. That's all. And you stare right in his eyes.
Yeah. There's I'm gonna ask both of you the question then. There's a lot of different ways to approach Zed Run. You can be a racer, you can be a breeder, you can be a combination of both. What approach do you find yourself using more? What would you define yourself as? More of a racer, or a breeder, or a combination of both?
Go ahead, Joe.
You want me to go first? I'm more of a racer. If I had the proper, I would say the proper horses, but the horses that I could dream, if you could say, oh, what would you want? I would want a Z1 or Z2, obviously, filly or mare or whatever in my stable. But what I fully believe in my breeding plan involves me buying a lot of unraced horses. I'm actually, right before I hopped on this stream, I'm actually kind of excited. I don't know if we can, if we have the capability to live stream it or not, but I just bought a Z4 Legendary, unraced, unnamed. I don't know if we can get that popped up on this stream. If not, I'll run them after. But I said, I won't run them, and maybe we can run them for the stream before we hang up. But
yes,
but based off of my plan, I buy a lot of unraced horses, and I pretty much race them. And I keep some of them. I sell most of them. But if I had the proper horses in my stable, I would probably be more of a breeder than a racer. It'd be a good combination. I'd probably breed, race, and then sell them. So.
Yeah, it starts with racing for me too. I think that's been kind of the most fun so far, but the breeding is like the long-term opportunity, and now it's kind of like what gets me going, like, oh, a horse unlocks to breed, and you get right on it. So I don't have quite the discipline to breed and sell so far. I think longer term I probably want to do some of that, but breed, race them right away, see what you got. Then you can bail for cheaper and just kind of reload for the next one if they're not good, or otherwise you're start testing distances. So that's kind of been my strategy.
All right, and so they did release something on head, like people are saying, because I got booted from Zed General chat. A lot of people don't know that. Like, 'cause well, when I got into Zed, I came in a little bit different. New York Times article. I got all excited. I bought like a donkey and was racing it, and then like at my job, I tried to get everybody to buy a horse, and I got about 20 people in on the terror drop, and none of us got a horse in the terror drop, man. Well, it costs money to transfer in,
Sure.
and so
And transfer out.
and transfer out. And so I was about to get beat up by 20 people at my job. So I was a little angry in the Zed General, and I got booted. So I say that to say there's a lot of changes that are coming, and we've been told in the Zed General chat that there is something to the head bobs. This was like highlighted it last Friday, and we think we saw it. I don't know. I can't see as well as other people. What do you think about the changes? Because I know on the stream, King Beavershot said that a couple months ago that he paid attention to where the horses break at, and I remember Eric Wong interviewed Takeoff Tonu and Steph Curry, and he said he did the same thing, and they took a lot of heat in the Zed community about them watching to see where people's horses break. I know me personally, after that article came out, I followed that and won some races, and so it now seems that Zed or Jay, at least, I don't know who was the actual person because I'm not in the Zed Discord.
It wasn't Jay. It was one of the. Yeah, it was someone else.
Somebody else. It was a higher up, I believe.
Okay. So, what are your thoughts on that now mattering? The visuals.
So, I mean, I'll start, Joe, and then jump in. But
Sure.
so yeah, I was always, Jay and others in the past had said visuals don't matter, and that was always kind of the way I understood it. I've seen the post, and it seems like there might be hey, this kind of might matter. Depending on where the horses break, like you said. The way I see it, though, is like, what are you gaining from that? Because either they break and they're going to finish well, or they don't break. So, like, don't you know the same thing by the result? So, I don't know. I'm still up in the air on, like, I'm not going to doubt that it matters in some way that the visual is representative, but what are you getting from the visual that you're not going to see in, like, a sample size of 10 races in the results from those races? So that's the part I don't know yet. Someone can explain it to me, and I'm happy to be swayed on that one. But like, it seems pretty obvious if your horse makes a break and you win the race, you're good at that distance, but like, you won the race anyway. So that's the part I'm not fully up to speed on, like what that actually tells you.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen Trav said it in the chat. I know Dave mentioned it in the chat right there, but I know Trav said it in general. I always thought that it didn't matter as well. I think personally, the implementations, whether they implemented it now or whether they said it wasn't true and now it's true, whatever it may be, I think it's nice because it allows people to have to watch the races instead of just you see the odds, or now you don't see the odds, you see the flames, you see the candles. I guess it's, you got 1, 2, 3 candles or whatever it is now. But now instead of it just being, okay, you see the odds, now it's, okay, why is the horse taking off at this distance? Why is the horse bobbing his head a certain way? We still have a lot to figure out. There's still a lot that needs to be learned, but I think from a farther perspective, it just allows these stable owners and horse owners to have to actually watch these replays instead of just looking at the standings or instead of just, going right on to Hawk You and Know Your Horses and seeing what position they finished in. So I think it's going to allow people to, understand the game more and understand the horses more, but I just don't know to what extent, as you were mentioning. I don't understand, like, in a 2,400 meter race, does a horse breaking sooner mean that it likes shorter distance? Like, does that mean it's a sprinter? I'm not exactly sure. Does that mean it's a pacer and it's getting ahead of the pack, and it's trying to stay out in front of everybody else? So there's still a lot of unanswered questions. But I do think that it is going to be helpful once we do know a little bit more in terms of, hey, we have to actually watch these races and have to pretty much figure out what our horses do like.
Okay. So
Yeah, and real quick too, I know some people in the chat too, and I think Golden Glow mentioned the head bobbing too. That's two different things. So the bobbing was brought up months ago. I forget who kind of figured that one out, but Nakamoto's and Szabo's heads sway side to side, and Finney's and Buterin's heads kind of go up and down when they're running. I don't think there's any more to the head bobbing than that. Szabo's and Nakamoto's go side to side. Finney's and Buterin's go up and down. That's it. That doesn't tell you anything.
Whatever horse puts the most money in my Zed wallet, its head can spin in circles the whole entire race. I don't care what the visuals look like.
Yeah. So that's different than the braking, though. Like, we should just separate those two things. That's purely just how the horse runs. It's the bloodline. But the braking is what we're talking about as far as trying to get an edge. And someone put in the chat, like, maybe the braking can help you early on, try to figure out a best distance, like, especially in a world without odds. I'll buy that. Again, I don't know. Joe brought up a perfect point in a 2,400-meter race. If someone, Terms likes to break early a lot of times, that doesn't mean she's a bad horse at 2,400. She's a great horse at 2,400. But, like, sometimes she'll break and just never stop, right? And kind of stay ahead, maybe not win, but
just trying to figure out, yeah.
So does that tell you something? Maybe early on, in shorter races it tells you, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, from my experience, because I did put it to practice, and I don't have horses anywhere near as good as your horses, and that's both of your stables. And I have okay horses now, and I have average horses. And so what I was able to discover was when I race them at longer distances and they break early, then I should race them maybe 200. Like, if it breaks early and, like, it gets down to, like, the last 200 meters and then it gets past, I would race it 200 meters 200 meters. Like, if I'm racing at 2,400 meters and it would have won the race at 2,200 meters, then I'm going to run it at 2,200 meters or 2,000 meters. I'm not talking about, like, when your horse breaks early and then it's overtaken at, like, 500 meters. I'm talking about, like, when it's closer to the end of the race, like within the last 400 meters. I've determined from my own studies that your horse can win within that 200-meter distance. Or if your horse breaks late and it's not going to win the race, I'll race it at a higher, like 200 meters higher. Sure. And I don't know about anything other than that, but I was looking within the last 300 meters because it seems like outside of 1,000-meter races, like when you get to like 1,800 meters, 2,000 meters, 1,600, and those, your breaks tend to happen around 1,000 meters, 700 meters, 500 meters, 300 and 200 meters. And then that last 100 meters, that's like every horse has a little speed burst right there. And so I was tracking the breaks along those lines to try to determine where I should race my horse at. And
yeah, so I've heard other people say that as well. I haven't tested it myself. I'm fully open to that idea that, if you break early, you should run shorter distance and whatnot. I think a few people have heard me on other streams. I'm a big speed guy. And I think a lot of that is becoming a little more focused material for people like Know Your Horse has got some really great graphs out there and speed data and whatnot. So to me, like, it all averages out to the speed at the end of the game, at the end of the race. So, there's Zed Chateau said something that I think other people have brought up as well, is that, like, it's not about when they break, it's about the top speed they get to. And again, makes sense. I'm willing to buy that. But at the end of the day, if you get that top speed, you probably won the race. And to me, the race time is what I'm looking at over a sample size to see kind of what that distribution looks like. We don't need to go down the rabbit hole of speed, but I'm all in on speed. So.
All right.
So sorry, I was just reading something in the Discord chat. I did have something to say about the speed. So sorry, Joe was messaging me. So I hope Joe's watching out there. How are you, Joe? Luke said on 8/3, so 5 days ago, by taking note of when your horse breaks, this can help with working out whether your horse is racing in its preferred distance or not. So kind of like you were mentioning, if the horse maybe, closes at a certain distance, but doesn't exactly overtake the first horse. Maybe it falls just, a second, or half second behind. You probably race it 200 meters higher. So if you're in a 2,000 meter race, maybe you try a 2,200 or a 2,400. Maybe, if your horse breaks too early and it gets, caught up by everybody else, maybe it likes a much shorter race per se if you're racing it in a longer distance. But going back to the speed talk, I mean, I've looked obviously at the charts a little bit that Tyler and Ryan produced, which I think are fantastic. Personally, I reached out and a couple of people saw in the chat. I wanted to know if the top times from every distance, 1,000 through 2,400, if those horses had the best odds in the race. Because my belief, and I've said it for a couple of weeks now, I think that the time is correlated with the odds, personally. So I think obviously the horses that pull the lowest odds or the lower odds more consistently are the horses that are going to be randomized, or the RNG is going to kick in to have the highest time more often. You're not going to see these top tier, or I wouldn't say top tier, but these average horses posting up these insane races that are only pulling, let's say, 10, 11, 12 odds. So I haven't dug into that data personally. So I think Tyler responded to me in the chat saying that he was going to be able to pull it possibly tomorrow morning. But I wanted to know if these horses that have these top times at these top distances had crazy low odds for the race. Maybe they were pulling 6.5 or 7, 7.1, which aren't crazy low. Obviously, they're not Roid Rager low, which is 1.5 or 1.7. But even Roid Rager didn't set any, personal times. Yeah, he didn't set any records. He might have been in the top for a few distances possibly, but it's interesting to see how that maybe correlates with each other. But that's my belief. I don't think you're going to see any horse that's pulling a 10 odd in a race or 11 odd or 12 odd have any chance of pulling an overall the best time on Zed Run. I think a lot of those horses you're going to see are pulling 6 odds, 7 odds against a weaker competition. You're not seeing anybody breaking records against Vanilla Bean personally. So that's my belief. But I would have to dig a little bit into a little deeper into that, which hopefully when Tyler or Ryan, have the time, which I know they've been super busy and keeping the website up to date, they can pull that info and we could examine it a little bit deeper.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask you, Joe, so far, what is your approach been to breeding? And then Crimson, you take over afterward.
Can you guys hear my headset all right? People are
I
saying
can hear
that
you perfectly fine, but I think they're just messing with you in the chat because I'm reading the chat as well. I think they're just messing with you.
That's very kind of all of you. So, you asked about my breeding technique or my breeding theories. Are you asking?
Approach, just your approach.
My approach. So a couple people asked me. I know a couple people tweeted me. Chris Moneymaker tweeted at me today asking, what ideas I have for breeding. Personally, no matter what I have, whether I have an elite, whether I have an exclusive, whether I have a legendary, a Genesis, I always look for a Genesis in the stud farm, whether I'm breeding with a Z10, whether I'm breeding with, a Z6 Finney. Pretty much I'm always looking for Genesis horses to breed with. But I also, a lot of people ask, do I look at the offspring? Do I look at the win rate of the parent horse? I don't so much look at that. I do look at the offspring and how they've produced other offspring. So if there are 4 or 5 other foals that the horse, the male horse has produced, and none of them have been winners and they've run a ton of races or their odds aren't that great, I'm a little bit more turned off to that than maybe, another, stallion in the stud farm that has produced 1 or 2 15 or 16% winners, which is another reason why I actually picked up that Z4 tonight. I'll link it in the chat in a minute. But the father, the Z2 Genesis father, I think has already produced 1 horse that has a 19% win rate. I think there's another one that's somewhere in the high teens. So I'll get that pulled up in a minute. But a couple other Z4, Z5 legendaries that this father already produced that have already proven themselves in lower classes with low odds. So that's something else that I look for when I'm searching through the stud farm.
Okay, that's a good approach. And
Yeah.
you, Crimson?
Yeah, so I do all the same stuff. I don't think any of us know the answer yet. My approach early on has been trying to get some good blood into my stables. So I've worked out some deals with other good stables, even if the horses don't produce, which they really haven't yet. Just getting some of that blood in there for future generations to try to kind of breed back and forth with. Maybe it skips a generation or two. You need the right combination. You could try it out with the same horse multiple times. So I've been kind of trying to set, kind of the baseline for the stable to breed with over the next year, and kind of go from there. I don't think there's any magic bullet. I think you got to mix and match and hope that you hit the right combination of, good blood, good racer, and randomness, and hopefully get lucky. But that's kind of been the strategy. I have a few males that I'll just stud out for the income that'll help pay, to breed my females into either horses on the stud farm or internally or with other stables I've made deals with. So that's kind of how I've been going at it. But again, it's only been, 45 days or something like that since it's been open. So still early.
Yes. Well, I will expose a couple of things I tried and didn't work, just in case.
Perfect.
Thinking about trying. All right. So I have two horses that I bred back-to-back months. One produced a 45 odd horse. It wasn't good, so I sold it. And then the second time I bred them two together, it's a a teens. An improvement, but it's not going to be a winner or anything of that nature. And so the first time, I just matched up them by distance, and they're both 28 placers and like 6% winners, but they finished second or third more than any other distance. So that's why I bred them together. They're both good from 1,800 meters to 2,200 meters. And so the first time I just bred them willy nilly. I owned both of them, so I bred them willy nilly. And that was the 45 odd horse. The second time, I matched up their last 5 races because I had a theory where it says when you breed, it takes a snapshot of the horses. So I think that when you're racing, it always shows the horse's last 5 races. And so I got the female to its last 5 races to be 2-1-1-6-6. And then the male to be 2-1-3-9-2, which is pretty good for your last 5 races. That's like you made money. And so that's the 18% winner. So I don't think the snapshot within the last 5 races is anything good. I may breed them one more time to try to see, but the male hasn't produced any winners. And the female, when breeding first opened up, I bred her with a Genesis horse that was like a 10% winner. And that horse is basically the same exact thing as its mother. It's going to be a second or third place finisher, which isn't going to lose you money. It's not going to be a beast, but it will be a horse that you're not losing money with, which aren't bad horses, by the way. And so those were the two theories I tried to test so far. I don't know if you want to expose any of any of your tests, but I can confirm that I don't know what the hell I'm doing right now.
Not many people do.
Yes.
People do. It's a crapshoot.
I think if you think you know what you're doing, you're way off. So
yeah,
I like that you're thinking outside the box. Those are things I've never thought of before. But no, I haven't tried anything that tough. I mean, we're in the first or second round with a lot of these horses, so it's been more of just like getting the volume just to try out, the offspring. I haven't done anything like super scientific yet. So
Yes.
I like what you're thinking about, though. It's at least you got a theory. You got to test it out.
Sure.
I've got like 30 more theories, bro.
Hey, that's what you got to do. Maybe you'll hit one.
I'll tell you, one of the interesting ones I heard was the A plus U-shaped. I thought that was kind of interesting. I haven't tested that one out yet, but mixing an A-shaped horse with a U-shaped horse, a horse that pulls maybe T-nods and only finishes in the middle of the pack, breeding with a horse that is, a solid U-shaped winner. I've heard people toss that around, and I haven't specifically tried that one yet, but I can definitely try that one because I definitely have the A-shaped horses. So I don't have many of the U-shaped horses, but at least if I take my A-shape and I find the ones that are the U-shape, at least I can figure if that's maybe a possibility or not. So That's one I heard that was pretty interesting, but nothing too specific. I keep it very simple. I try to find all the cheap Z1 and Z2 Genesis Nakamotos, that are out there. And if those are not out there, then I go for the Z3s and the Z4s. And if those are not out there, I slowly work my way down the list. So,
okay, it's not a bad strategy. And so, hold on, let me pull this over really fast because we're gonna. I don't. How much time are you guys still available for? Because there's a couple things that we can still get into.
I can probably do another like 20 minutes or so.
yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
So.
All right, so Zed has released the I'm stuttering. Sorry, the announcement that they did on Friday. They did a quiet patch, and they finally released patch notes. What are your thoughts so far on these patch notes? I'll read some of them off real fast. Let me jump over here and just announcements. If you know any off the top of your head.
That's the one with the race and a class up, I think, which I think was a good update. I think that was obviously something that was much needed. People talk all the time about sandbagging and racing classes up. I don't necessarily think that works for every horse. I think a lot of these horses, when they do pull, you see a lot of horses that pull 45 odds or 40 odds and they don't come in last. It's the horses that have the teen odds or the 20 odds that sometimes come in these last spots. Or if you have a really strong U-shaped horse that's in that race, a lot of the time that horse is probably going to come in the last spot, if not the first spot. So I'm one of the people who I think sandbagging can be done. I don't think it's profitable. And I don't think it's as easy as people say it originally was, but I do think that update was something that was needed, and I think it definitely helps move things in the right direction for sure.
I will take the time real fast and shout out Tum Teasy from Sean versus All, because that was his idea, and the Zed team implemented it. A couple weeks ago on the Poseidon stream that I did, the Poseidon interview I did, and he put that out there, and no one I know besides him was thinking about that. And so gotta shout him out for thinking about it and putting it out to the public. And what were you gonna say, Keith?
He's got a great stream too.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
Fantastic stream.
So I think that update's huge. I think, look, some horses are naturally going to stay in low class. I know, there's some Vanilla Bean chat in the or comments in the chat. If a horse can consistently lose at a low class, there's nothing you can do to keep that horse from staying low. I think the point here is to basically say, hey, look, this horse under all circumstances should be a class 1 horse, but it can continually, race certain distances up and keep itself down. So I think that update is huge there. I think there's still going to be monster horses that are able to stay low because there's one distance maybe that they can continue to race in class 4 or 5 or 3, whatever, and keep themselves down. But for the most part, this kind of eliminates a lot of the horses that are able to just, hey, I can still pull good odds, but I go to class 1 and instead of winning at 25%, I'm winning at 15, but my 12th place odds go way higher, and therefore I class down, but I still have a good win percentage. It should hopefully remove some of that, so I'm all for it. Like I said earlier, I'm not a D-classer anyway, just with the horses I have, so whatever keeps it kind of more fair, get people to where they should be racing, I'm all for it. But I do think you're going to still have some horses that stay low just because of their distribution. It all comes down to the variability of their kind of speed, and those graphs, they just have fat tails and they're going to come and last a lot, so it is what it is.
So 2 things. Number 1, I know Dave is asking, you can find it on the Zed site under announcements, because I know they didn't put anything in Discord. That's all I have to say about that. I'm done talking about keeping the Discord up to date, because we all know I can slander that all night and my feelings towards that. But the second thing is, I know people talk all the time about Vanilla Bean. Vanilla Bean's a sandbagging horse. Vanilla Bean, to me, is the complete opposite of a sandbagger, because that horse can win in any class. I know that horse finishes in last a lot. I've personally seen that horse finish in 12th place 5 straight times in class 5, and I've seen that horse win 5 straight times in class 1. That horse is just one of the strongest U-shaped horses you'll find in the game, regardless. No matter what class it is, no matter what prize entry fee prize pool it is, that horse is the definition of the ultimate U-shaped horse. And you have to think going forward with the new racing updates that they're going to implement the new class system, how is that horse going to fare against everybody else? I think that horse is going to fare fine, because if you put that horse in a race with all the other best horses, that horse is still going to pull sub 10 odds personally, and it still is going to come either in first or in last place, regardless. Yep. So yep. I know people are worried about how are U-shaped horses. I know people were asking me, how are U-shaped horses affected? If you stick a whole bunch of U-shaped horses together, they're all going to either fight for first, or all they're going to fight for last. It's going to be a little bit more of an even distribution, but that goes hand in hand personally with the odds. I mean, a horse that's 15 odds consistently or 15 average odds is not really going to be a U-shaped horse. That's going to be more of a flatliner or more of an A-shaped horse. So I know a lot of people ask me to touch up on that whenever I hop on streams or whenever they have a chance to talk, because they're worried that their U-shaped horse or their potential U-shaped horse is not going to fare well in this new class system. I don't believe that to be so. I think they're still going to be just fine.
Yeah, and I think the key too, it hasn't been implemented yet, but in like the big announcement last week, they talked about having, specific races for horses that have never won, or I think they even mentioned like sub 5% win percentage. Like that's actually going to be more powerful to eliminate horses, again, using Vanilla Bean as an example, even if it can stay in class 5, if it now can't race, against any horses that choose to race in these other, 0% or sub 5% win categories, those other horses now have a better shot at winning because they don't face Vanilla Bean, and Vanilla Bean by default should face a little better competition there as well. So sure. I think you'll see changes like that start to even out some of the classes as well.
Yeah, I'll add in Vanilla Bean is the natural U-shaped horse in every single class it races in.
Yeah. The bigger sandbaggers are the ones where you have one distance where you can just lose consistently.
Gun for Hire is probably the best example.
There's a bunch of them, yeah.
But Gun for Hire is probably one of the originals. I mean, if you look up that horse can perform. I mean, it's become a little bit more of a spike horse now just because of all these beasts that are being bred. But that horse can still pull tremendous odds in certain distances. And I believe, what is it? Is it lower down? Is it 1,600 or is it just like 1,000, 1,200 for him? I believe it's 1,600 for Gun for Hire.
Yeah, and LBJ Goat does the same thing.
Sure, LBJ Goat.
At arbitrage. I mean, look, in the current system, like you're maximizing profit. Like hats off to them. They're not doing anything wrong, right? But like those situations are going to be a little more tamed because you can't, if you're LBJ Goat, right, just calling out them, it's one like what? 5 ETH in profit or something. It's amazing, right? Like these guys are great.
Staples in the game. He's got 100%. One of the best staples in the game, hands down.
100%. But what they do, they have a monster distance horse that can still pull 9, 10 odds at 1,000. I'll see it against Crimson every once in a while, but they know they're going to lose more, right? So they go to class 1, race 1,000. It drops them back down, and then they dominate, class 3 at 24. Great, but that part is going to change. You can't now go to class 1.
Sure.
They're going to have to, if they want to race 1,000, they're going to have to stay in 3, where they're probably still going to beat these horses.
Correct.
And you might naturally move yourself up.
They're still going to pull. And LBJ Goat is Gun for Hire and LBJ Goat are both, you can say, sandbag capable horses, because I want to say they're sandbagging horses. That makes the stable owner sound horrible, but sandbagging capable, I feel like, is probably a better terminology. But they're actually a little bit different because Gun for Hire, actually, his odds spike up at certain distances. LBJ Goat is naturally a loser at shorter distances, but can still pull 8, 9, 10 odds, which gives him more of a capability to win at that distance in the same class level if he can't jump up to a certain class and D-class now. So the horses such as Gun for Hire, where they do take that spike up, now have, I would say, a little bit better of a chance to D-class in the same class level because of the fact that their odds are still going to take a bit of a hike, even facing less tough competition, just because naturally they don't run well at that distance. So I believe it's 1,600 for Gun for Hire. It's one of the distances.
Oh, so. Yeah, a lot of the horses, like Crimson has a 1,600 spike too. I just choose not to exploit it, and I just kind of run it at 1,000.
So does Mula.
And personally, my belief, and I tell everybody, if you have a very, very good horse, it will be a natural U-shaped monster. you can run it in the same distance and it will naturally form that U. You don't have to force that horse to lose at a certain distance. You see a lot, like Vanilla Bean obviously can run long distance and naturally U. There are a lot of horses that can run long distance and just naturally U without having to change up class or a certain distance race at all, because they just either are they have that distribution where they're first or last, even if they pull 6 odds.
Yes. And so on the rest of the class notes, because we all think them doing what they did with the class as far as racing up, not losing points, that's huge for people who think that these horses are maintaining a class by intentionally classing down. Um, we're going to have fatigue being implemented, and 5-minute race times. I hope they implement those simultaneously. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm all for all the updates they announced last week. I think fatigue makes a ton of sense. It'll help, again, even out, the monster horses, Crimson, whoever, just we can't run all the time at the same peak speed. It doesn't mean you can't run them all the time, but their performance won't be as good, so you have a chance of beating them more often. So I think that's great. A side note there, for all the people who hear me talk about speed so much, I think Zed gave us a huge clue in that announcement last week that speed is what drives everything, because they said in the fatigue section something to the extent of, if your horse is fatigued, its maximum speed will come down. To me, that tells you the way the game is programmed. It's every horse has like a speed capability and a distribution of speed. So I thought that was like a huge little side note nugget that either they intentionally or unintentionally put in there. But anyway, like going back to the actual changes, I think fatigue's great. 5-minute wait times is great, because now like it's not letting you exploit it where you can just enter 5 minutes and just keep racing. You're going to have fatigue to deal with, so you're going to have to pick your spots. The good horses are probably going to go up in dollar value in terms of entry fee races, because if you are getting fatigued when you're at full, whatever stamina, whatever they give us for a bar, you're probably going to be like, hey, let me race a bigger race, because if other horses are fatigued and they're throwing in $100 race, I got a better chance now, right? So you're probably going to naturally see good horses go up. Kind of opens up the bottom tier for other horses. So I think that's great.
You're just not going to see these Princess of Powers and Talladegas. You're not going to see them racing $5 races no more, because these owners right now, they're maximizing profit obviously by being able to race so much in shorter. I wouldn't say shorter, you have 2-3 hour wait times, but previously, they were able to race them within a half hour, most of the time. So now all these profit margins that they were working with are going to be minimalized with stamina. The only way to even kind of maximize them now is by running these higher pot races with full stamina when they have that, because they're not going to be running two $3 but two $5 races. They're not going to make the same return on investment that they used to. So I think that also helps open it up for obviously the small pot races, which I also know they mentioned they're going to be introducing more of them. So I think it just allows for a more diverse field, which is it's better for everybody, because trust me, the community, but most people want to see everybody succeed in getting horses that can pull 8, 9, 10 odds and have the chance of winning, because they're going to tell their friends about it, and then their friends are going to buy unraced horses, and that's how you pretty much keep the market moving, is obviously by word of mouth. And on a side note, I think Zed has done a tremendous job with the sponsorships. I think the NASCAR sponsorship that they announced went a lot, I wouldn't say under the radar, but for people who maybe live in Australia or overseas, or maybe if you're not a sports person, NASCAR is a huge following, very, very big following. I know you say horse racing and NASCAR don't really go hand in hand. They kind of do. So I think that was a tremendous job by the Zed team to secure that for sure.
Okay.
Totally agree.
Agreed. So the big thing, the big controversy with the announcement was the removing of odds and the NBA Jam He's on Fire logo that's coming. What are your thoughts on the removal of odds?
So I am all for it. I know the immediate response to that can be, well, you have good horses, you know what they are or aren't already, and therefore you can exploit that. Totally true, but after 3 months, 6 months, I'm going to have so many new horses. Like, I'm going to be in the same boat as everyone. Yes, I know Crimson is good where she's good, and that will never change, we hope. But, I think overall, when you think about the longevity of the game, again, we want people racing horses, right? So odds give you the immediate insight. They're the best predictor of value that we currently have that exists today, and you can get them your first race. Now, they're never going to be perfect. They only take into account first place. They don't tell you second, third. They don't tell you. They don't tell you a bunch of other things. But they're still the best predictor. If you only had one thing to look at, it would be odds. So taking that out of the way adds a lot more of this exploration part to the game, and I think that's the key. If you have a donkey but you win your first race, how great do you feel? But you don't know you have a donkey, right? Race it 10 more times. Yeah, okay, fine. You start losing money over 20, 30 races, probably hang it up, right? But have some fun for a little while. Don't pull 30 odds, come in second, and be yeah, I'm never racing again because I pulled 30 odds. Have a little fun. So I think number one, that's there. I think number two, people are also overhyping the idea that odds are gone. What are we going to do? Zed has said there's something else coming, right? So whether it's their ELO system they're coming up with, the flames are going to be there. You're going to have some indication of hey, if I'm pulling a flame every race, I'm pulling 6, 7, 8 odds, whatever it may be. You can kind of back into that. So I think everyone needs to relax. Let's see it play out. I know that general chat went up in arms the day that came out, and I think we have speed data now. We have finish profiles. We're going to have the flames, whether they're meme worthy or whatnot. But I think we're better off in the longevity of the game because we need another reason why all level of horses should be racing. And I think if people are smart and people are looking at things other people aren't, you're looking at speed, you're seeing where small sample sizes may not be telling the whole story. You're going to be able to pick off some good horses for cheap money because people aren't going to have odds at their back. They're going to lose 5 straight races, come in 6th, 7th, 8th. They're not going to have tested all the distances. They're not going to notice, hey, it ran really fast in one race. It just got outbeat by 2 other horses. But if you look at the grand scheme of things, that time was really fast, and that's usually a good indicator that your horse can run, right? All these things are going to come up where if you're really staying on top of your shit, you're going to be able to pick off these horses on the open market too. So I think it kind of adds another layer of the ability to beat the game, like you talked about earlier, for people really focusing on what's going on.
No, I definitely I agree that I'm one person who's definitely leaning on more side of getting the odds removed. I do think that it's more of a better thing, obviously, because we started talking about it in the beginning of the stream when I first hopped on. It involves you having to actually watch the races and study the horse and understand, when it may break, what exactly does it do, where it finishes in the race, just to kind of, instead of, going right to know your horses and saying, oh, I pulled 45 odds, this horse is, glue. I obviously can see the downside in that, but at the same time, we're talking about horse racing, so there has to be some sort of odds to me. I get the flame idea. I get, there's a lot of different ideas that have been tossed around. So I'm open to obviously seeing what the flames necessarily are. But it goes all the way back to when I first started, one of the first odds tools. I mean, obviously, Know Your Horses, HawkU, all these sites weren't around. The 2 tools that we had were Picks.play with Zest, and you had the Discord channel, the racing channel, where you were able to pull odds. And what happened after the Discord channel stopped posting them, you would have to go to Picks.play with Zest. I know that was originally a part of the plan. There's no way that you could have any sort of betting to the game just by looking at candles, personally. I know that takes the whole idea of horse betting out of the equation. So I think that when you get to that point, I know we're pretty far down the road probably from even getting that live and running. But when you get to that point and you don't have odds and you're only looking at flame sticks or whatever, flame algorithm, whatever it may be, at the beginning of the race, you can't take bets. You can't bet realistically on horses based off that. You could base it off their record, their overall win rate. But when you go to a track, you don't look at the board and say, oh, the number 2 horse has 3 flame sticks and the number 5 horse has 2 flame sticks. Like, that doesn't update before the race. They actually have odds that are live. So I think there has to be down the road some sort of I don't know, intermediate idea that in the middle idea that does include some sort of odds. But I guess for now, like I said, I'm open to the idea. It can't hurt, just getting rid of the odds and having people, race their horses 15 or 20 times before maybe giving up on them isn't the worst thing in the world. But I think if you do want to take Zed to the next level, which includes betting on horses, you can't, continue with this as the answer.
Agreed.
I just think to that point, just on the betting, I think that has to come from third party anyway. You would never, like, if DraftKings, for instance, was taking betting, and I know there's some partnerships, maybe, even like Atari with what they have going on in Vegas, they would have to be setting those lines anyway. The way I see this playing out is the speed data becomes your kind of like link to odds. Now, that's tough in the early part of a racer's career because you don't have any speed data. I could see one day them saying, hey, you got to run, 10 races at some certain entry level, like call it a Griffin, right? Maybe Griffin's not one race anymore. Maybe it's 10. And then therefore, you've built at least some sample size of like, hey, how fast is your horse? And then the third parties can say, hey, we've seen that before. We can do some machine learning. We can say, hey, that profile usually equates to this win percentage. Now we can put odds on it. We can see what the competition was in your races. So to me, the odds have to come from like a third party, not from Zed. And I think that's kind of what Zed's probably trying to do is like back away, say, hey, we'll still give you something that says, hey, is your horse good, not good, that you can extrapolate. But if you're going to get down to odds and we're going to actually bet on these things longer term, it needs to come from whatever party's taking the bets, and that won't be Zed.
I mean, that definitely makes a good point. I don't know if we lost.
You can host now. What do you want to talk about?
we took over, so that's
I had
what
one
happened,
other thing to bring up too that we were talking about before you joined.
Made a good point, though. By the way, you made a good point because you're going to have third-party sites that maybe it is of every, all the horses running in a race, but maybe it's based more off of the horse's overall, record of racing instead of it being a simulation of 10 or 1,000 or 10,000 races, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But
totally.
You can go back to what you were saying before I cut you off.
Well, I was going to fill in because, we lost Golden Glow, but I'll turn it back over.
Okay, sorry about that. My browser clicked off because I was moving things around. All right. With the odds, I do have a small disagreement with it. And the only reason I have that disagreement is I would like to see the rest of the game be implemented. And I'm thinking more along the lines of the gate preference and the weather conditions, which are going to affect how your horse performs. I'm more along the lines of them moving the game closer toward completion, because right now, even though people may not like, and I think it's more along the lines of the deads, people don't like the fact that horses, people see the odds and they're like, oh, 40 odds, I'm not racing that. Where we have a lot of horses on the platform that can't be raced. But I think they kind of fixed that problem with the events that they're going to schedule and the different racing, same thing, the different type of racing events like 0% winners, 5% winners. Hopefully they, like we said before we started streaming, I think they need more classes. I think it's somewhere, like me personally, I think they need about 10 classes. And I know we might take a little hell for this because people say, well, every horse shouldn't have a place. And I disagree with that strongly because everybody has to spend money to buy a horse. Every single person who owns a horse on the platform, unless you won one in a giveaway, you had to pay for that horse. And so if you have a 45-odd horse, why can't your 45-odd horse race with somebody else's 45-odd horse in class 10? Because the horses that naturally U-shape that we were talking about earlier, they're not going to U-shape in class 10 and be able to run in class 1.
Totally.
They will win against 45-odd horses 97% of the time at any distance. And
Yep.
so that would be my solution before they take the odds out, or what I would like to see before they take the odds out is for them to implement the totality of what they have in the roadmap as far as racing is concerned.
I don't disagree. I just think if you're Zed, like you put yourself in their shoes, like they want people to race. So why do we have this like magic bullet number that we're giving out? Like if I were Zed, I would have removed odds months ago because I would just be like, look, this is like preventing horses from racing, and as a long-term like enterprise, that's not good. Yes, you don't want horses losing a ton either, but there are free races, there are cheap races. Like just let every horse race and then figure out on your own if you have a good horse or not. So I always go back to a business point of view is like, if I'm the game maker, what am I doing? That's why I just don't see them sticking with odds. Let third parties try it if they want to. If Know Your Horses wants to come up with an algorithm pre-race and try to come up with odds for everyone, go for it. But like, take it away from Zed. So I don't think odds are going to be here for long in the way we know them now.
And hold on, the only reason I'm disagreeing with you is when I first got to Zed, I didn't even know what the hell odds were, and I bought a donkey, and I lost $100. I raced that horse at least 75 times. It kept getting third.
Yep.
And I'm like, and then when I actually discovered the odds, I was like, whoa, what the hell was I doing?
Welcome to the game.
Yeah, but it got a bunch of.
It's a good way to learn, though. Good way to learn.
Yeah, good way to learn to lose money. But no, it was it's a bad horse. The person who bought it from me, they raced it another 40 times. This horse still never had to win, and that's at 20 odds. It has a bunch of seconds, a bunch of thirds, but it's never going to actually win a race. I don't think, unless there were more classes for it to run against. And that's the only reason my personal experience is a little bit different because I didn't get a good horse and I got a really bad. It's not a bad horse, but it is because it's got a very low ROI, but it does place third quite often at least, which only gives you your money back.
What I would love to do, and what I hope they'll do longer term, and there's a couple of people who've been talking about it in the chat here and there throughout the night, is some idea of like practice. So in real life,
Yes.
The one difference here is like you don't have odds for your horse, but you're able to practice it. You can time it, whatever. If my hypothesis on speed is right, which I feel better about today than I have any other day, and I'll feel better tomorrow than I did today, that speed is what drives the game. Like, why not have some limited amount of time every week you can practice your horse? You can run 10 races. You pick a distance, let's say. Every week you can take one distance and you can run 10 times. And then over time, you're going to build up this wealth of data to say, hey, here's what my horse can run. Here's the shape of the curve on races that I paid no money to enter. There's no other horses in, and I can just specifically look at speed. Then now I've put no money in. I haven't lost $100. I haven't lost any races. I haven't damaged their reputation. And now I can more accurately go in and say, hey, here's where I think I can win. Now I need to focus on the competition, which competition should be unknown. Again, that's where the odds take away all that. When you get into a race, you know immediately how you stack up. Like, you have to race against competition to see how you stack up over time. But if you can, like, every week say, hey, I'm going to race this week at 1,200, and it immediately simulates 10 races, and here are your speeds for your finish times for those 10 races. You keep track of those on Know Your Horses or on a private whatever or a spreadsheet, and over time you're like, hey, I've now figured out this horse is really fast here, it's really slow here. Then you start entering races. I think that's the long-term solution. That's what I would be doing if I was Zed. But you need to limit it too, because you don't want people who have all the time in the world entering 1,000 races and they know exactly where their horse is good day one. Maybe you do it every week. You do 10, and then over time you build up that data. So just one thought.
Excellent idea for the Zed team. I know one of you are watching because you are always watching. I second that idea. I hope
Joe's out there watching somewhere.
I'm available for consulting if you need me. So
no doubt. But that's an excellent idea. Being able to test if speed's going to matter and the brakes and all that things are going to matter. Give us it could be an offline thing, or I don't think it could be an offline thing because I understand that the NFTs, which are the horses, are themselves one thing, and then the database is where the actual data is kept on your horse's data, and that's kept probably in Ebbs' house somewhere with like a supercomputer. I'm just joking, Ebbs, if you're watching. But yeah, so give us an ability to test our horses, and that's probably going to soak up a lot of bandwidth and things of that nature. I don't know how exactly you would architect that from a programming perspective, but exactly what Kkirk said just a second ago about being able to test your horse at least once a week, maybe even once a month, because I can
Yeah,
imagine like
something.
there
Yeah.
being millions of horses and people trying to test it, and if you have to scale it down, but something to give us a capability to know our horses' capabilities would be perfect. Instead of since odds are going to go away, but we just have to be able to somehow track the attributes. And when you implement, and the reason I do say without gate preference or weather conditions or anything to that nature, that's why, like, if they would implement something like you just said, that would be perfect, as long as gate preference and weather conditions were unknown. Like, we would know our distances, but we wouldn't know our gate for the discoverability part.
Yeah, or like I saw someone in the chat says, you know, you pay Des coin to do practices. Like there's a ton of
That
ways
would be
this could
good.
be implemented. So more Des coin unlocks whatever weather it is or what gate you're in. Like you can make this work a ton of different ways, but I think having some option for some limited amount of testing is ideal. And that would be like the closest to real life. Not that we need to be real life, but I think that helps with removal of odds.
Descoin will be introduced by like 2025, so we'll be all right. So my Griffin, by the way, just filled.
Yes.
And
Okay.
this Z4 I bought is a donkey.
Nice.
So not a donkey, but it's pulling fourth best odds at like 11. So there's a couple good. There's a Z19 that's pulling the same odds as a Z3 legendary in the race. So that has a chance to be possibly pretty good. So
2400. I'm gonna
to 2400 there. I linked it in the chat. I also linked it in private. So it might be a sprinter. You never know. You're right.
Hey, Golden Glow, I'm gonna hop if you guys are gonna do the race. It's probably good timing anyway. But
sure, yeah, I think we'll be cutting it after this anyway. So we were gonna finish it off on the Griffin.
Perfect. I'm in for the race, so let's do it.
All right. While we're waiting, it's 4 minutes out the race, and I will put it up when it's time. While we're racing, do you guys have any merch or anything you want to plug? Because that's one thing. I like plugging people's stuff because I think as a community, as long as we support each other in our endeavors, the community grows.
So let me see if I can get this. I don't know if I could post it in here, but I do have some East Coast stable stuff on its way, which is pretty neat. I'll be giving that out. I'm not really going to be selling it. I'm not into this for profit, but I think it would be cool if people just kind of rocked my not even just my gear, but if they rocked any Zed Run gear. I think that's awesome exposure for the game and for everybody itself. But I definitely do have some cool stuff on the way, so I'll make sure you guys get it, Golden. I'll make sure you get a piece so you can rock for the stream, because I know you love that Poseidon hat. So, but I'll be posting some of that shortly. Just a couple delays and whatnot, nothing too crazy, but I have some cool stuff on the way, which is really nice. And the other thing as well, me and Heckman, Josh Heckman, some of you may know him as Heckman Horse Barn. We're looking to do, I'm working on it right now, but we're looking to do a Tuesday night stream just for an hour every Tuesday. We're still figuring out the details. That should be coming in about 2 weeks, but the ultimate goal for us is pretty much to bring on one person every week and pretty much just to go over Zed Run talk and some pretty cool giveaways. Going to be giving away horses, obviously. There's a lot of great streams out there. Obviously, you have a great one as well, which has just started up fairly recently. So I think you're doing a tremendous job with it. I think the past few episodes I've watched back have been awesome. So I commend you as well. But I think that's going to be exciting. I think we'll be able to fill up, Tuesday nights, since nobody else usually takes up Tuesdays. But we'll obviously be flexible with the rest of the community. We won't obviously try to steal anybody's spotlight, but definitely allows some smaller stables to come on and just talk and go over how they got into the game and pretty much what their end goal is going to end up being. So,
all right. And so real fast, when you get at least hopefully, I upload this video to YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube at a later time, don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button. But make sure you get the Twitch or the YouTube stream so that I can put it in the descriptions for the YouTube.
Cool.
And Kirk, do you have anything?
So just got a logo done. Shout out to Stanley in the Pony Plug group. Awesome artist, and he hooked me up with an awesome logo. He's still kind of finishing some of the stuff for me. He's been on vacation this weekend, but so actually just starting to think of some ideas to print my own stuff. But I'd be happy, again, not looking to sell anything. If anyone wants Crimson Racing attire, reach out. I'd be happy to hook anyone up. I'll do a bulk shipment and we'll figure it out. But yeah, we're getting there, but nothing to plug. Appreciate it.
All right. I just have to add.
CJ, I just saw what you said. Private webcam streams.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have you on as a guest one night.
All right. I'm trying to get the your video in. And
I think the race goes off in like 45 seconds, but I was more excited for it before I registered my horse.
Don't you hate when that happens? But see, the odds, they ruined it for you.
It goes
if there
back
were no
to the
odds.
Griffins, we can go right back to the odds talk. Yeah, you would think you have a Z4. But I'll tell you what, I wasn't waiting for a soft Griffin. I'm one of those people who I do enjoy racing my horses against, some stronger competition. Some people are familiar with one of my first big sales, Eager to Bow, and he pulled 3.8 odds or 3.6 odds against the Z1 Genesis, a Z3 Genesis, and the Z6 Genesis. And that was probably one of my ultimate highs of Zed Run, is pulling 3 odds Griffin in a fully loaded Genesis race, and you had a couple Knacks and Sebos in there, and that was pretty awesome.
You're down, it's about 2,000 meters so far. The break shouldn't happen just yet, so
if we study this race, we can potentially see how my horse likes to run.
Yes.
Potentially.
But again, what are we looking for, though? If it breaks at 1,200 or if it breaks at 500, what does that tell?
You don't know.
I don't
that's know. like example, the horse in the 12 gate right now, the Sheriff, he's fallen a little bit behind. Does that necessarily mean he's a closer and he's just kind of saving stamina till the end of the race? Like, there's so many question marks and variables. Sure.
Right now,
it's random. We think it's random, but we never know.
Yeah.
Right now, from my analyzing, this first half of the race doesn't even mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything. It's usually the last half of it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's literally when it cracks 1,000 meters and this break that's getting ready to happen at 1,000 meters, and all the horses start breaking. Like right now, it's a little bit now. See, now
so
this
you can see now horse in the 12 spot broke early.
Yes, along with the horse up here, the running full. Now the second break. You got Menardis breaking extremely early. So the Sheriff, you might have to start him at 1,400. Whoever owns that horse, if you're watching. Now, if you look, this horse broke early.
I'm still all the way back there.
Yes. But you could start breaking right around now. You're not going to catch him because it was too far back. But he's not even going to get caught. But
I don't even think my horse broke, though, necessarily.
It did break. There was
no real break.
It did break, but it broke a small
that horse
amount.
Didn't break.
It was all the way in the back.
That horse didn't break. If that horse has low odds, you have a real winner forming right there. So,
but it's studying over more than one race to determine its pattern. Because this is also the Griffey.
Now that's a very interesting race to examine because the few horses that finished on top were not any of the low odds horses by any means. I think the first place horse was 15 odds, and what were the other two? I would have already exited out, but that's an interesting race to examine because I didn't see any true break by some of those horses in the back at all. Mm-hmm. That was a very interesting race to examine. So it just goes into the hand of, we have a lot to learn as a community once they do remove the odds, because then we'll try to figure out what we have to look for
Yes.
and go from there.
Totally.
But Keith, you were saying what you're coming with merch and a small merch. I think you guys could sell it for like $5-10 just because you got to pay for manufacturing. If you get great logos, like I love this logo, I like the Doofy logo, I love the Pony Plug logo. If they wanted, shouts out to the Pony Plug and Sean Verso. I see a lot of them in the chat. I would love for you guys to make your little logos. Crimson East Coast. I like the logo for your Twitter. That would be a pretty cool one. You just could make the logo and donate it to charity.
Sure.
You know, like Pony Plug does great work with charity. I would buy their stuff if it's going
Totally.
to.
We
Sure,
can do
and that also brings up a good point. So by the time I think my stuff arrives, at least I think I'll have something set in stone for it. But that is a good point. But again, it's not for a profit purpose, but maybe adding some sort of incentive to it will at least allow people to want to buy it instead of necessarily giving it out for free or doing it as a giveaway.
Yeah, I like the charity angle too. So I'll keep you guys posted on that.
Sure.
Okay. And so thank everybody. I would like to thank everybody who showed up and stayed. There's still 33 people. We're going to wrap up. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you, Crimson. And thank you, Joe, for showing up on extremely short notice.
Of course.
Highly appreciate
Sorry I couldn't be here earlier.
It's okay. It's okay. You got a lot to say.
I could talk for hours about this game. So
I talk for hours about it every day. I'll be in the After Shadow on Sean vs. All Discord. That's a great place to go. Just people talk Zed or Axes all day. But I want to thank everybody for showing up. Pony Plug's running their next tournament this month, and thank you for bearing with me. I don't think I did nearly as good as a job as I would have if MJ was here, because that's like my partner. That's my good partner. He's very good at interviewing people.
We appreciate you having us for sure.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you. And in the future, I extend this to every single guest. If we're streaming and you're in the stream watching and you want to come on and say something, I'll shoot you a link to come right in and say anything you want. Every single guest has that opportunity. But thank everybody for showing up. Be sure to hit the follow button. If you followed tonight, thank you for following. And this stream will be uploaded to YouTube on Wednesday.
Cool.
Awesome.
Have a good